Another quarterback is gone. Russell Wilson is headed to the Giants. We talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Another veteran quarterback off the board as Russell Wilson goes to the Giants. We react to it and what it means for the Browns' pursuits of a veteran quarterback. Let's set the record straight on, quote, reaching for a quarterback at number 2. And if the Browns didn't take a quarterback at 2, then what? I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast and for making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you will find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. All you got to do, hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. And of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show. Hit us up. Share your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team. So I encourage you to be part of the conversation every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And yes, as we found out on Tuesday night, Russell Wilson off the board, maybe before people were expecting him to sign. I think there was this holdup in the QB market where everyone was kind of waiting to see what Aaron Rodgers was going to do. He was supposed to be the one to sign first, and then somebody like Russell Wilson was going to fall into place after that, but he jumps the gun. He gets the deal done, picks his destination. He's going to New York. And so to hell with Aaron Rodgers and whatever he was trying to do, Russell Wilson wanted to know where he was going. He wanted to get this thing ironed out, and he does. It's a one-year deal, $10.5 million guaranteed, chance to earn upwards of $21 million next season, just based off of incentives and things like that that are built into the contract. And so my first thought when I saw this was, okay, was money the factor here? Because we know the Browns are sort of strapped. They can only do so much. They can only, reach into the coffers so far. $10.5 million guaranteed doesn't seem all that hard for somebody like Russell Wilson, but depending on the type of incentives that are built into the contract, ones that would be earned or you have to sort of qualify them as likely to be earned or not likely to be earned in terms of like what you have to allocate in your salary cap. And so depending on what types of incentives they are, maybe the Browns couldn't guarantee upwards of $21 million if you were to get there. And so it felt like, maybe the price just got a little bit too rich in some respects. I also just think like Russ was never really the perfect fit for Cleveland, even though I still felt like of the guys left, he was one of your better options. I talked about that a couple weeks ago, where it's like people were splitting hairs on all these guys. And it was like, of the ones that are left, Russ ain't so bad of an option if that's where it sort of landed here. But yeah, I don't know that he was like the perfect, what you want. None of these guys are. So I don't know that a lot of Browns fans are like losing sleep over this one. I don't know why there was so much hate for Russell Wilson. Maybe it's because he played for the Steelers and I think people find him annoying. But again, like I think if they had landed him, you could have made it work for a year. But no, like it's not some like, well, darn, we missed out on Russell Wilson. I don't think it should be. But obviously it just means that there are less options now available to the Browns to sign as another veteran for this room, which we know they want to do. Kenny Pickett has even alluded to that they are pursuing other quarterbacks and likely to add another quarterback via the veteran market. But now, if you thought it was slim pickings before, well, now it's even worse. You're really at the bottom of the list here in terms of guys that are available to you. And so the guys that are available in the free agent market include these following names: Joe Flacco, old friend Joe Flacco, who Browns fans obviously know all too well; Carson Wentz, who from all accounts is the Browns' backup plan now that Russell Wilson is going to New York, and we know that for sure. He's the one that they've been reportedly ready to pivot to if it didn't work out with Russ. And so that could be the next plan for Cleveland, is to bring in somebody like Wentz to be another veteran arm in this room. We'll see. Other names that are still available: Trey Lance. Doesn't do much for me. I'm sure it doesn't do much for you. Drew Lock, again, doesn't do much for me. Probably doesn't do much for you, although he did win a game last year for the Giants to prevent them from getting the number 1 overall pick. So there is that. Teddy Bridgewater, Bridgewater's interesting because, again, he was basically retired playing or going and coaching high school football, won a state championship, and then was signed to the Lions as like a backup late in the season, and joined the team to be part of their sort of playoff run. And he is a veteran that I do think he brings something to the table from a leadership standpoint. I don't know what's left in terms of like his talent wise. There is a history with Kevin Stefanski there, so maybe he comes back into focus. I don't know. But none of these options are going to invoke much hope or inspire much hope for Browns fans. And it's just gotten worse and worse ever since, unless I guess you're in the camp of bring back Joe Flacco from 2 years ago and see if he can sort of be that guy again in Kevin Stefanski's offense. I think I'm good on that because for a couple reasons, one of them being I don't really want to ruin the way I view Joe Flacco at this very juncture, given what he did a couple years ago and leading the Browns to the playoffs. But also it's 2 years later. Like, I just don't know that Joe Flacco is going to move the needle for this team, this offense, or the fan base, and be able to just like replicate that what we thought was a lightning in the bottle type of situation anyway. But maybe I don't know. Like I'd be okay with it. I honestly think I like him more than Wentz as an option for whatever reason. But it feels like Wentz is there, and maybe the way they go. After that, there's a couple other things that are at your disposal if you're Andrew Berry. One is something I talked about last week. Maybe you trade for Joe Milton. A lot of upside. 1 year in the NFL, showed you something on tape last year. Had a good preseason, played a really good end of the season, final game for New England, filling in for Drake May. And maybe that's the route. Maybe you add another young arm that's a veteran in the sense of the definition, by definition, but only really has 1 year of experience. So there's some upside there. And that's a move you can make, although it sounds like the Patriots want a third-round pick. The other one is Kirk Cousins, who's still available. Browns continue to sort of be linked to him. They've been linked to him all offseason, and maybe that's the route you go. But as I talked about yesterday, I just can't let Kirk Cousins like hijack my draft plans or hijack my team by demanding, if I'm coming there, I want 17 games. I want guaranteed starter. I can't do that. Like the Browns have to operate from a place of like what's best for the team, not what's best for Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins might be good for you right now. Is he going to be good for you in a year from now? Is he going to be good for you 2 years from now? Like I was always on a 1 year sort of basis with somebody like Kirk Cousins. I like the idea of Kirk Cousins when you were getting him on the vet minimum. That's not the case now. You're going to have to give up some sort of draft capital to get him. And I don't know that I agree with that. And you have to wait till after the draft. So you're waiting a little bit longer to sort of fill that void. So maybe this is where it lands. Maybe the Browns are at a point where they're desperate. There's not a lot left out there. The coffers are the shelves are empty. And so they have to sort of force the issue on a Kirk Cousins trade. And that's where they end up. Or maybe they're content adding Carson Wentz and understanding, listen, we're taking a guy at 2, or we're taking a guy in this draft that we're going to feel really good about. We're going to make sure that happens. And so let's just ride it out, get to the end of April, make our draft picks, and we'll have a revamped quarterback room that still has a lot of potential because we have this rookie, and we'll sell everybody on that, and the team will rally around that. That maybe that's the plan. I don't know. Maybe that's where they're sort of at right now. And if it's a quarterback at 2, it makes more sense that that's where they would be. I don't know that like you can just willy-nilly be like, let's just get Carson Wentz and then draft Jalen Milroe maybe in the second round if he doesn't go sooner. I don't think he will, but just saying like that feels like a hope and a prayer. This feels like an indication that like the Browns are either going to trade for Kirk Cousins or they're comfortable taking somebody at 2, probably Shedeur Sanders if they're going to take a quarterback, and that they know, they'll like that setup and be okay. But there's still a lot that has to play on that front. We got plenty of people still mocking Abdul Carter, the Browns, and they skip up and pass on Shedeur Sanders, which I want to sort of get back into coming up here in a minute. But regardless, that's where the Browns are at. With Russell Wilson going to New York, we knew the options were bad. Well, now they're worse. There's not a lot out there. Kirk Cousins via trade, Carson Wentz via free agency. Sounds like that's been the backup plan, so that could be the route they go. Joe Flacco's still out there, and a bunch of names that are even more uninspiring than those if they're of any interest to you. Probably not. Speaking of Shedeur Sanders, the Browns potentially taking a quarterback at 2. I want to clear the air. I want to be very blunt about something that I want to dispel when it comes to taking a quarterback at 2. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable sports moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Last year, I used Gametime for the first time. I bought tickets to see Ohio State, Michigan. It was a disappointing result, obviously, as an Ohio State fan. But I saw a national championship Buckeyes team in person last year, and I'll forever be able to say that. Now, Gametime is my go-to app for buying tickets. In fact, I just bought tickets to a concert this fall for my wife's birthday, but keep that between us because her birthday's coming up and I haven't given them to her yet. Don't forget that when you use Gametime, make sure to use Gametime Picks, providing curation to make it easier to find better value on tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Obviously, we got the NCAA tournament going on right now. Chance to buy tickets to any of the games coming up here next weekend and beyond. It's a great way to purchase tickets and go to the events that you want to. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, this segment is going to come off maybe harsh. This segment is going to come off as probably pretty blunt. I may get criticized for what I'm about to say, but I want to be clear about something when it comes to taking a quarterback at number 2. And this all starts with this idea because there was another ridiculous mock draft that came out on Tuesday from Mike Tannenbaum, and nobody should take stock of what Mike Tannenbaum says anyway. Maybe that's a little harsh too, but listen, if the Browns don't want Shedeur Sanders at number 2, or you personally have, broken all this down, you've seen what other people are saying, and you don't want Shedeur Sanders at number 2, that's perfectly fine. I get it. I understand there's reasons not to maybe like him or feel like he isn't worth the number 2 overall pick. I can wrap my head around that. I get it. But like I said yesterday, when some of these people are mocking Shedeur Sanders to the Giants at 3, and they're bringing up the fact that they think Shedeur is going to be a great quarterback, and one of their biggest points of emphasis with the Giants taking him is, well, they can't pass up adding a young quarterback because of where they're at right now. They have a coach and a GM who are on the hot seat. They really need this position. Yes, they have Russell Wilson now, but they have to think about the future. They have to plan ahead beyond the years of Russell Wilson, who's aging. Do these people not realize that the Browns are in the exact same situation as the Giants? Like the exact same situation. Coach and GM who are on the hot seat need a quarterback. Like, what am I missing? And so that's my larger point, is it's the people who are making this point of pumping up Shedeur Sanders as worth the number 3 overall pick to the Giants for the same reasons that he would be worth it to the Browns. And if they think he's going to be great, then why would a team that needs a quarterback pass on him? Unless it's something that they know. But to me, there's been no indication that anybody knows what the Browns are trying to do right now. It's all guesses. I mean, Adam Schefter has changed every week what he thinks the Browns are going to do. So I can't rely on anybody actually knowing right now what the Browns are going to do or where they're leaning at this juncture. Maybe that changes in the next couple of weeks before the draft. But right now, there's no indication what they're going to do. So I just cannot wrap my head around a mock draft that has the Giants taking a quarterback for the exact same reasons that the Browns would. It makes no sense. And so, again, I'm going to say this. This is the bigger point that I want to get to. And this is the thing that might rile people up. But I'm looking right into the camera. I'm talking to you. This needs to be understood by people. Missing on a quarterback in the first round or the top 10 or even the top 5. It is not the death sentence. It is not this kiss of death that it used to be in the NFL. Let me repeat it. If you miss on a quarterback, if you take a quarterback at 2, like the Browns are in, and he busts out, he's bad, he stinks. It is not a death sentence anymore in the NFL. Maybe it's a death sentence for a coach and GM. It's not a death sentence, though, for the franchise to quickly get back on track. And we've seen examples of this. And this is my point. The 49ers, they traded up to get Trey Lance. They're doing just fine with Brock Purdy, who they got 2 years later. Or no, 1 year later. They got Brock Purdy 1 year later. And I get that's different. It's a 7th round pick. So you missed, and then somehow a 7th round pick panned out for you. So congratulations. Arizona, though, same exact thing. Josh Rosen, they took him. Busts out. 1 year later, back in the same position, they take Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is a borderline top 10 quarterback. Like I think he sort of fluctuates throughout his career. There's moments where you're like, he's top 10 MVP conversation. Then there's moments where he's not so good, but he's never lower than like being like what, the 13th, 14th best quarterback in the NFL. Like I think they feel pretty good about Kyler Murray in Arizona as their guy moving forward. It's easier than ever to pivot out of a missed quarterback, because if you miss and you stink again, you suck again, you end up right back in the same place with an opportunity to draft a different quarterback that's at the top of a class and try it all over again. What's so bad about that? Yes, I guess the one bad thing is you sit through a down year. And like, but when I say this, I get pushback from people. And the biggest pushback I get is, well, if they draft a quarterback and he's a bust, everyone gets fired. They start all over with a new staff that's going to strip it all down, and it's going to take 3 years to rebuild the Browns back up to being a contender. Guess what? I got news for you. If the Browns take Abdul Carter and then they start the year with Kirk Cousins or Carson Wentz or Kenny Pickett, or they draft a rookie who they're hoping that later that they hope turns out that they're sort of banking or hoping and wishing on a hope and a prayer turns out to be a great quarterback, and they finish with 4 wins next year anyway, everyone's getting fired regardless of if they took Abdul Carter and did the quote-unquote right thing. And then guess what? A new staff is coming in, and that staff could still decide to hit the rebuild button. That staff could still decide we're going to tear it all down to the studs, start all over, get our own quarterback, and it could take 3 years to be competed again. That's just the reality of the situation. You could ultimately end up in the exact same place, taking Shedeur Sanders, and he isn't good, or taking Abdul Carter, and you end up with 4 wins. Wouldn't you rather take a chance on the guy who plays the most important position in the game and is more likely to impact the results on a week-to-week basis overall, if he's good? Like, that's what when I say I'm okay taking Shedeur Sanders, that's part of it for me, is like the upside of a quarterback, if he pans out, is higher than what a pass rusher is going to be. And you can tell me all you want, like Myles Garrett and Abdul Carter, pairing those two guys together would be otherworldly. And you're right. I'm not going to be mad if they take Abdul Carter, because I'm going to get the standpoint of like why that player is getting taken there. He is uber talented, has a chance to be really good, really elite. And with him and Myles Garrett together, yeah, I mean, I see people on social media salivating over just the idea of that. It's a beautiful thing. But how much week to week does a pass rusher really impact winning and losing? I guess you could argue with the Steelers, like TJ Watt has quite literally decided games. You get Myles Garrett doing that occasionally. The Colts game 2 years ago comes to mind where he single-handedly won you that game, essentially. Like, yeah, there's moments, but a quarterback week to week can literally like be the difference in you winning and losing games on a week-to-week basis. He can impact the game at that level. There's not a lot of players that can do that. And so Shedeur works out. Guess what? You just got yourself a franchise quarterback and you're all set. If he doesn't, you're going to stink again. Everyone's probably going to get fired. And then you're right back in the same position next year, probably drafting top 5 with a chance to take one of these quarterbacks that apparently is going to be part of a better class next year anyway, because that's what everybody's saying. Next year's class is going to be better. So if you're right back in that position, who cares? If you end up in the same place, who cares? Like, some fans wanted a full-on rebuild this offseason anyway. So if your argument is like, well, I don't want to get forced into a rebuild, many fans were already saying that they wanted that this year. So is that really some nightmare scenario that the Browns have been there plenty of times when they've had to go through rebuilds? So ultimately, like, listen, no, they should not force the issue and force themselves into drafting a quarterback just because they're like job security and they're worried about getting fired, or they know it's their biggest need. Like, I get why those things are, unwritten rules for how you handle the NFL draft. If they like Jalen Milroe more than they like Sanders, and they like Jackson Dart more than they like Shedeur Sanders, fine. Take one of those guys and find out too. That's totally fine. But if they like Shedeur Sanders enough that he's a top 15 to 20 player on their board, he takes precedent over all other players, including Carter, because he's a quarterback. That position matters more than others. And you're in position to draft this guy now, not later. Like, there's no like, well, let's wait and see if we can get him at like 13. No. If you think he's that high, if you think that highly of him that he can turn around your franchise, you take him. I can't stress this enough. And so listen, I get it. Like, I'm not trying to say force the issue. I'm not trying to say I'm going to be mad about Abdul Carter. I said last week, I could understand any of these picks being made at that spot, and I'm not going to be upset about it, even though I know the fan base seems pretty split on it. I know the fan base will be upset about it. I'm not there. I'll understand it either way. And if they don't evaluate these guys as Shedeur as being that type of talent, then we live with that. We move on. Maybe they think Jalen Milroe's that guy. Fine. But at the same time, if Shedeur is up there, and just because he's maybe lower than Abdul Carter, I'm sorry, you take the quarterback. And if you miss, it's not some death sentence. You can get out of it pretty quickly if your team's bad again, and you just draft one next year. It's gonna be okay. Like it's not some like doomsday scenario here if they take a quarterback at 2 and they miss. So I that's another reason why I'm leaning quarterback there, why I'm leaning Shedeur there, most notably, assuming Cam Ward is gone, because I said yesterday I'm assuming he's going to the Titans. Although the Titans seem to be leaving the door open on the number 1 pick still being available, which we can talk about in regards to where the Browns go quarterback in the draft, because it's going to happen at some point. If they don't take 1 or 2, when will they take one? That's coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, so maybe a good starting point actually is where I left off last segment, where I mentioned that the Titans, according to a report from Adam Schefter, are at least open to fielding offers for the number 1 pick, even though they're hosting Cam Ward now on a private workout. Cam Ward said at his pro day on Monday he was going to seal the deal that day. Apparently he didn't, because the Titans are still bringing him in. They're going to have a private workout. He's going to throw for him again. And the fact that Schefter's reporting that they're at least the phone lines are open, if you will, would suggest that they maybe still aren't sold on Cam Ward as the number 1 overall pick. And I think the exact report was something along the lines of like they've grown more interested in him, but they're at least fielding calls still. And my biggest takeaway from that is, listen, if they were sold on Cam Ward, if this was like Andrew Luck or something, there would be no price that teams are willing to pay. Now, he mentioned that they're like the price is higher than it was. Like you're going to have to give up even more of a premium to get to one to get him, because they do like him enough now, it seems, to at least pull the trigger on him. And they know that he's now impressed everybody to the point where, teams maybe come calling and you're like, now I can ask for more because he's the coveted quarterback of the class. So you might have to pay higher price, which is something I talked about earlier with Tyler Rowland on this very podcast. The idea that it's not just look at the value chart and see what the Browns are going to have to give up. You might have to give up more to get there if it becomes a bidding war. So just be prepared for that if that's what happens. And if the Browns do think Cam Ward's the guy, then I say you give up what you need to get there, yes. But if it's not Cam Ward, because I'm still expecting he goes number 1 overall to the Titans, and it ends up not being Shedeur Sanders, and they decide to pass on a quarterback at 2, there's this big unknown of like, okay, so when do they go quarterback? Where should they take a quarterback? What quarterbacks should they take? I think that's an important conversation to have, because, there's other names out there that some people like, some people don't. And I can guarantee you the Browns will be taking a quarterback at some point in this draft. Might be in the 2nd round, might be in the 3rd round, might be Will Howard in the 5th round. I'm imagining in that instance, I would imagine they take multiple quarterbacks. But yeah, like they're going to take a quarterback at some point in this draft. It's inevitable. It's just a matter of where and the value that they place on these guys. So if the Browns decide, against my better judgment, because I wouldn't do it, to not take Shedeur Sanders at 2, assuming Cam Ward's off the board, then I do think that's where you pivot to 33, becoming the pick where you sort of have your eyes on a quarterback. And that might be Jackson Dart. That might be Jalen Milroe. There's sort of varying opinions on where either of those guys could go. Dart has largely been, I think, the 3rd highest ranked QB in the class. I have my doubts about him. I think a lot of it's just like he played within a very structured offense with Lane Kiffin. Didn't really have to go through progressions all that much. It was like one side of the field and throw type stuff, and that can change. You can develop that, but I'm not super high on him. But I guess I can understand the lure of him. He's got some mobility to his game, and he's done all the offseason stuff. He's looked good. Milroe, I think, is interesting because everyone's been pointing out the fact that his footwork got better from Senior Bowl to Combine. I'm sure it'll only get better when we see him throw at his pro day and, training camp next year. Like he's clearly working on that. But I still say, if we're going to come on to podcasts like this and tell everybody that tape is gospel, I have to fall back somewhat on the tape that I've seen. And yeah, he can improve his footwork, But in a crunch time situation, when the game's like, is he going to revert back to the habits, or is he going to? Are these things going to take hold? There's improvement there. It looks like he's coachable, so I like that about him. We know the athleticism is off the charts, and I've kind of compared him to like Jalen Hurts coming out, where it's like maybe not the best, most crisp passer, but there's a lot of athleticism, so you like the upside. And so Jalen Hurts goes in the second round, and you take a chance. And I could see some team doing something similar with Jalen Milroe. But the difference is I think Jalen Hurts was even though there's doubts about him as a passer still, I think he was still a more refined passer than Jalen Hurts is. And you watch that tape, man, it's a lot of errant passes, a lot of passes over guys' heads, a lot of passes off target. I just don't know if I want to sign up for that. But those are the guys that I think are next in line for the Browns if they pass on a quarterback at 2. Also, don't sleep on Tyler Shuck out of Louisville. I think he's got a chance to go fairly high, probably like day 2, I would imagine. Maybe he slips into day 1. I also think it's interesting too, because like with the 33rd pick, and I've talked about this already, the Browns have a perfect opportunity. Like they are perfectly positioned to trade back up into the first round to take whoever they think the next player they want on the board is. Just like they really, really want to fill something they need or something, because you want that 5th year option. And so if they pass on Shedeur 2 and they're like, you know what, Tyler Shuck, he's our guy. Late first rounds coming up. They got a couple picks left and they're like, let's trade back up and let's get Tyler Shuck right now, because it could be Miller or Dart too, but like any of these guys, let's trade back up because we want the 5th year option on them. That's an interesting development, right? Like that's an interesting sort of place to be. Now you might just trade back up and get a different player, maybe a tackle, whatever, and and still take a player that you want to have 5 years of control with that you think is going to be a starter for you. I think whether it's a quarterback or not, I think that matters and that's valuable. And I actually think there's a really good chance the Browns do trade back up from 33, just because that 5th year option is super valuable, especially for a team that's trying to kind of like rebuild on the fly here. That can come in handy. So I could see it happening that way. But I do think like if they pass on a quarterback at 2 and they take Abdul Carter, for instance, I think you're setting yourself up to absolutely be in position to take one at 33 or earlier, depending on how you feel and if you want to take one in the first round or not, or if it's worth it. So I would sort of be targeting that. I think the next guys in line are Milroe, Shuck, and Dart in no particular order. But all those guys could be on the Browns' radar next if they don't take Shedeur Sanders at 2, which I feel like this is an important thing to talk about, because lately there's been a lot of mock drafts that don't have them taking a quarterback at 2 for whatever reason, whether I agree or disagree or not. If that's how it plays out, they got to be ready to take one that's, pretty quickly after that, because if you're taking Will Howard in the 5th round and that's it, like nobody's buying that's your plan for the future, right? Like nobody's buying that like Will Howard is your great hope to solve this quarterback dilemma. And like there's a lot of development that has to happen there. So like you want a guy that can start sooner rather than later. And that's what you're looking for in that end of the first round, second round at 33, maybe the 3rd round if you waited that long. But I still think like you're probably pulling the trigger around 2 if it plays out that way. You don't take somebody at number 2 overall. So yeah, that sort of makes some sense. I think those are the next names kind of in line. And I can guarantee you the Browns will be taking a quarterback at some point. It's just a matter of who. As I said, another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thanks for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. More to come this week. As we've talked a lot about the quarterbacks today, I still want to get into like the best and worst case scenarios for the Browns quarterback room and depth chart to take shape. We'll try to get into that maybe tomorrow, but make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft Show, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everyday at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Peace.